Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Over the Bars League 2 show, a weekly podcast looking into the world of League 2. And as always, I am joined by Pearson, as well as a special guest, Johnny from Ale and the Vale podcast. So first of all, Johnny, we'll briefly talk about your podcast, then Port Vale. Tell us a bit about the Ale and the Vale podcast. Where can we find it? And how did you get into it?
Yeah, so we're on, obviously, we've got our Twitter account, which is Ale and Vale Pod. It's on Spotify, iTunes, it's everywhere we've possibly been able to house it. We've housed it. And it started as just a bit of a project during lockdown. My friend lives in Canada, Stu. He decided that he wanted to do something to keep him a bit closer. So he just asked me and Danny, the other lad, and we just said, yeah, during lockdown, because obviously we weren't doing anything to give you a chance to keep up your mates, and then just spiraled from there, really, and we're still doing it.
So, what changes have you seen at Port Vale since you've started doing the podcast? Because you've had a very good season so far. Okay, you haven't played a League Two game since December, but there are so many positives in and around Port Vale at the moment.
Where do we start? So we started doing the podcast it was just after, I say, just when we were in lockdown. So it was the second season that Carol was in charge of us. So that first season when it got curtailed, we were 8th at the time. And because we voted points per game, we missed out on the playoffs. The second season, everything was looking rosy and was absolutely disastrous for 5 months. We started off well, but lost to Kings Lynn in the FA Cup, and then from there, I don't think we won in about 13 games. So she finally sacked the manager, and then it took about a month and a half for us to get a manager in. Flitcroft came in as director of football, and then after that, they hired Darryl Clark, who was Walsall manager at the time. And then from there, we just haven't looked back, really. We had a good end to the season, which kept us safe. And then in the summer, we released 15 players. So that was impressive, especially as one of them was Tom Pope, which Vale fans thought had a contract for life. So he was a little savage in that. We spoke to Popey, and Popey wasn't happy with how it happened. And from his side of the story, you could see why. But the good thing with us speaking to Popey is it meant the club reached out to Popey and had a chat with him and kind of ironed a few things out, and there's a testimonial coming for him. So there's a lot of decent things that came out of it. And then Clark's just hit the ground running this season. It's been a breath of fresh air, really, because we've been used to some dour football. I think the worst game we actually played this season was against Rochdale.
Yeah, it's a good result for us on the day. I think we're on a good run at the time. Obviously, Beasley popping up with a couple, and obviously he's gone now. So so I can watch them highlights back with a bit like more of a reminiscing tone. But just while we're on the subject, because you mentioned there, Dave Flitcroft, he's a bit of a hero at Rochdale and someone I've had a lot of time for because during his playing days, and then he was assistant manager to Keith Hill in like our prime, really. What's the opinion of Port Vale? Because I know director of footballs can get a bit of a bad rap, but from my knowledge of Dave Flitcroft, he always comes across like a nice, genuine footballing man.
Well, to sum up Dave Flitcroft in one sentence is trust the process, because that's his little tagline. So as soon as he came in, the one thing he said was there's a list of things as long as his arm that needed fixing, and just trust the process. Then every single interview since then, he said the same thing. So it's become a bit of a sort of a mantra every time something happens that's the fans don't agree with. So this week, for example, we've signed Connor Hall from Harrogate, and Leon Legg's gone the other way. And some of the fans were a bit upset by that because Legg has been here a few years. He's a lovely bloke and stuff like that. But he's 35. His legs have gone. He's an head on a stick, really. And so everyone's just been saying trust the process. They understand what's happening. You've replaced a 35-year-old with a 28-year-old, etc. So that's kind of when things aren't going the way that you think as a fan, that's the thing that's being thrown out there. And luckily, it's working in a positive way, because you know what it's like with fans. If it would have gone the wrong way, everyone would have been saying it negatively. So
So, do you reckon, because at the moment in the league table, and again, you have had a couple of games postponed due to COVID, you are sixth in the table. So, personally, I reckon you could easily get promoted as you are such a good side. But do you reckon that you could see it through till the end of the season?
I think, providing we get this window right, then yeah, 100%. I think we've got a good spine of the squad. We were just missing a couple of little bits in there. We seem to have addressed one of them with the centre half from Harrogate. He's 6'4". We were lacking a bit of pace and a bit of height at the back, so we've addressed one of them things. We brought in 2 new strikers as well. Edmondson from Fleetwood, who's again 6 foot odd, and similar build and mould to Jamie Proctor, who has been out for 2 months and doesn't look like he's going to come back anytime soon. And we've really missed him. And then we've brought in another younger lad, Kieran Harrett from Huddersfield, who scored against Brentford with a nice little diving header. And he seems a bit more of a nippy fox in the box proper striker. So I think we've addressed a couple of places. So if we do the right business, 100%. I think we're looking at 2 players probably to go out, and we've signed Chris Hussey as well, who I think a lot of people will agree was the best left wing back in the league last season. So we can't complain about that.
So, if you could sign any player from League Two for your squad, which player would it be?
Dominic Telford.
How come?
He scores goals. I think so. Someone that's got, I think, he's got 18 goals already this season. Something around it. Someone that does that, you can't replace that.
Yeah, I think we named him in our team of the year or as one of our players of the year, didn't we, David? Fantastic.
Yeah,
player.
yeah. I think also we gave the top prize to Jamil Matt. I think the assist for Jamil Matt gave him the edge, but yeah, I think Dominic Telford came a very close second. I think in the end.
But anyway, just to wrap this bit up, where can they find your podcast? What is your tag on social media? And yeah, where can they listen to the show?
Yeah, so let's say tag on Twitter's at Alien Vale Pod, and it's on Spotify, it's on Apple Music, and it's on somewhere else. I can't remember what it's called. I'll find it in a bit. I don't do that side of it. I just turn up.
And of course, welcome to everybody in the live chat as well. Send in your questions for Johnny and David. We will get to them at the end of the show. And as always, if I can quickly find the banners, we will be doing our game of the week, performances of the week, and villains of the week. So get your picks in. And of course, we will read them through at the end of the show. But on to the League Two games now. And we're going to be looking at the past Saturday's fixtures, and then we'll get on to the Tuesday fixtures later on in the show. We'll briefly touch on them. First of all, Northampton Town, who are third in the table. They played Crawley, who are 12th in the table. Crawley won 1-0. Crawley won their first game in 3 weeks thanks to COVID postponements when they beat Colchester on New Year's Day, and they backed up that performance with another superb performance against Northampton. The visitors thought they had found themselves ahead early on when Nick, I can't pronounce that name, Tesarula, somebody would tell me in the comments, played a through ball into Sam Matthews, though he found himself in an offside position. Though Northampton's 5-game unbeaten run at home came to an end when Matthews rolled in Tom Nichols, Crawley were able to see the game until the final minute when Shankar hit the bar, which basically saved Crawley. So, Johnny, I'm going to start with you. That was almost a missed opportunity for Johnny Brady's side because they could have closed into second place Tranmere Rovers, couldn't they?
Yeah, they could have, and I'll be fair. I was really happy it ended the way it did, because any points that are dropped from the teams that are playing games at the minute is music to my ears.
So, David, Crawley Town are 12th in League Two. They're still only 4 points off the playoffs and can potentially get a bit of momentum over the likes of Salford, Exeter and Leyton Orient. Out of the 4 sides up above them that are currently in potential playoff contention, do you reckon Crawley Town could potentially, given their performances, be the most likely to climb into them?
Not for me. No, I've never been a huge lover of Crawley Town. I think I'm expecting them to probably finish towards the bottom end of the table as opposed to the top 7. I'm not expecting them to get any higher than 12. There's better teams above them. Salford are improving. They've got a lot of key players to come back over the next few weeks. I know Ashley Hunt is still missing. Ian Henderson's not far away from full fitness, and Gary Neville and the class of '92 lot are going to throw a bit of money at that club in the January transfer window. It's all they know what to do in it. So struggling a little bit. Let's throw some more money at it. But Exeter, Leyton Orient, both really strong sides as well. Mansfield got a cracking manager in Nigel Clough. So yeah, I think 12th is a bit of a high for Crawley, man. I'm not expecting to get much higher than that.
So Keith Hill had a miserable return to Prenton Park when second place Tranmere Rovers reasserted their automatic promotion aspirations in a very comfortable win over basement dwellers Scunthorpe. Coming off the back of this, and we'll briefly touch upon their draw on Tuesday night with Salford later on in the show, Tranmere had been undefeated in 6, their best spell of form in 3 years. Charlie Jolly's return from a loan spell at Chester was marked off on the 23rd minute with a goal, and on the 31st minute, Elliot Nevitt volleyed a fantastic goal, which was his 4th of the season, into the net after a weak clearance from Dan Gallimore. As the visitors, who are 3 points below the safety line, tried to claw their way back into the game, the hosts showed just how clinical they can be on the counter-attack when Sam Foley outpaced James Rowe and had the composure to make it 3-0. And here's a cool stat, David. This was the 35-year-old's first league goal in England in 3 years. Mickey Mellon's men, however, capped off the game with a goal from yet another substitute, as Ryan Watson, who had only been on the field for 5 minutes, sealed off the game after tapping the ball into the back of the net. So, Johnny, Tranmere Rovers have been spectacular so far this season. What do you think has contributed to their season so far?
They don't concede goals. I think that's the big thing. If you don't concede goals, you only have to score 1 to win a game. I think they've got the best defence in the league, but they're 18th worst attack, but the second. So you look at it, and then today they've gone and signed Kane Hemmings, so they're trying to improve their attack.
So, David, it wasn't a happy return to Prenton Park for Scunthorpe boss Keith Hill, who, of course, you are very familiar with. They're away to Exeter this weekend. Okay, Exeter are doing fairly well at the moment, but surely this is a must-win game for Scunthorpe.
I think every game's a must-win game for Scunthorpe at the minute, the way they're going, but Exeter an absolute free fall at the moment. I don't think they've won in about 5 or 6 games, so it's a game where Tranmere will be hoping they can pounce on the vulnerabilities of Exeter, but it is a tough place to go in Exeter, so I'm not expecting Scunthorpe to have a happy away day there, and I really want Scunthorpe to kind of climb out of it. I know a lot of Dale fans kind of turned on Keith Hill towards the end of his spell. I think it was very much 50-50, but you can't argue what he did for our club anyway, and I think Scunthorpe fans will be hoping for the same there, but things are looking quite bleak for him, really, isn't it?
So, 11th place Salford. We'll move on to Salford versus Newport. 11th placed Salford travelled to South Wales to play 7th place Newport. And Salford had won successive league games for the first time this season when they won their game away to Newport. Things might have turned out differently early on, though, when Dominic Telford got onto the end of Oliver Cooper's ball from across the 6-yard box, though ultimately he was unable to convert it. This result also saw Newport miss out on the chance of closing their gap onto the automatic places. Salford's fantastic build-up play with midfielder Matty Lund at the heart of most of it almost saw Salford go in front just before the half-hour mark. Though some fantastic goalkeeping from Nick Townsend kept the game at 0-0. Salford, however, responded to that missed chance emphatically a minute into stoppage time after Finn Azaz embarrassingly deflected Josh Morris's strike into his own net. Salford then went on to double their lead 7 minutes after half-time when Brandon Thomas Asante got his 5th league goal of the season. So James Rowberry's side have been fairly consistent in the league so far, Johnny. Would you be too concerned with this loss if you were a Newport fan, though?
I wouldn't be, no. I think you look at what they've done so far this season. The game when we went there, they're the best side we've played. At the heart, and it's about the halfway stage, so I think we've pretty much played everyone except Salford, I think. So I wouldn't be too concerned. Um, I was bigging them up, and then Rochdale went and put 3 or 4 past them the Tuesday after. So it shows everything I know about football. But they were a good side, and when you've got someone like Telford that scores your goals, and you've got other players in the squad like Mickey Dimitri who's still there, and such like they've got some real quality. So there's nothing to be worried about at Newport.
So Salford, David, they found their feet under Gary Bowyer, who we've been very critical of on the past in this show. We've spoken about Crawley potentially climbing into the playoffs, but could Salford potentially do the same, considering how they do have, as you alluded to earlier on, significant backing from the owners?
Yeah, I think there'll be a couple of big signs for Salford this month. And obviously, they've got, like I was saying earlier, a few key players come back. I think getting Ian Henderson fits a big one for them. Obviously, I know he's in advancing years with the experience, and he's still got a knack for scoring a goal. So I think he'll be pivotal for him as well. Obviously, keeping Josh Morris fit, I think, is a big one for them as well. He's an absolute, it was a great sign for them at this level. So yeah, I think a bit of investment brings some key players back. I'm expecting them to be in the mix for the top 7, but I think after the start they've made, I don't want to say they give themselves too much to do, but yeah, it's just going to be one of those. Can they maintain the form they're on? Because the other night they did look all right against Tranmere. Obviously, we'll come back to that, but yeah, I think it's a bit of a difficult one really with Salford because they'll go on a bit of a decent run and then they'll go to absolute pot for a few weeks and they'll slip back down the table, and that's been the story of them for like the last couple of years, really.
And of course, good evening to everybody in the chat. Good evening to F28JP. Thank you very much for joining us. And good evening to Gary Jones as well. Evening, lads. Great show as always. I missed last night's live stream due to work, but caught up today. Great stuff as always. Thank you very much. That means a lot to both David and Di. And of course, we will answer all the questions at the end of the show. And just to quickly plug it, get your game of the week, performance of the week, and your villain of the week in for the end of the show. And of course, we will read them out. So elsewhere, we're going to look at the other games in League Two. So Carlisle, who are 19th at the moment in League Two, they played 14th place Bradford and they won 2-0. So here's another interesting stat for you, David. This is really boring actually, but bear with me. You have to go all the way back to August 1985 when Bradford last won in Carlisle in what was a 2-1 away win in what used to be the old second division. That also proves that I'll have far too much time on my hands to be looking at things like that. But the wait continues, unfortunately, for Bradford, as Jan Songo, he almost scored early on in the game, but unfortunately, referee Andy Haynes called the goal for offside, which was a controversial move, but from what I saw, it was offside. Carlisle have been rejuvenated as of late, as for the first time since April of last season, they have won a hat-trick of league games on the edge of half-time. Former Bantam Jordan Gibson's impressive strike from the edge of the box inflicted a blow that Bradford would struggle to come back from. There was a dramatic end to the game at Brunton Park. There was former Bantam player Amari Patrick stole the spotlight on what was his return to to the game since his injury. This didn't Amari Patrick did miss a goal which was actually flagged for offside, although this didn't last long as he finally got his goal after winning a duel against Kelleher, and he had the composure to score his first goal since March. So, Johnny, Carlisle are now 6 points above the bottom two. Judging by how they performed out there against Bradford, can you see them falling back into another bad spell of form?
Bradford's a weird one, isn't it? I think you look at the club as a whole, and it should be a lot better than it is, but they always seem to go hard early doors and then fade away. So I just feel that they try to invest heavily. They brought in the manager, obviously, that got Morecambe promoted, and they brought in a lot of the Morecambe players along with him, and it just hasn't worked. I think you've got to be a special kind of manager to manage Bradford, and I just you look at it and they just need a complete reset, and a bit similar to Mansfield almost, where they've just thrown money and thrown money and thrown money and hope that something sticks. You've just got to sometimes change tact.
So Derek Adams, David, he got Morecambe promoted. Morecambe are, no offence to them, a smaller side than most. He did okay at Plymouth. They ultimately left on very bad terms. Should we maybe be expecting the same from his stint at Bradford, because it isn't going too well for him so far, is it?
Yeah, I think the Bradford job's become a bit of a poison chalice in the minute, really. It's a club that, as Johnny alluded to, should be doing a lot better in the league. And yeah, currently languishing in the bottom half of the table. It's really not good for Bradford. I think Derek Adams will be given the full season to kind of put his own stamp on things. Yeah, things don't look great, do they, for them at the moment? But yeah, I think we're obviously halfway. We're only halfway. We're currently in the middle of the January transfer window, so there's a lot of football yet to be played. But yeah, things aren't looking good for Bradford at the moment, are they?
So, Johnny, Carlisle, they're 19th at the moment. They've won a hat-trick of games for the first time since April. Let's be positive, because how impressive were Carlisle in that game?
Yeah, any team that beats Bradford, you've got to stand up and applaud. And Carlisle are on a decent run, and who knows what could happen? There's always a team that makes a late surge, isn't there? Well, maybe one step too far this season for Carlisle.
And for our final game, and we'll also talk about the other fixtures on Tuesday after this one, because Stevenage, who are 21st at the moment in League Two, they won 3-0 at home to Walsall. Paul Tisdale's long-awaited first win as manager of Stevenage did come to an end. A slice of good fortune, though, from actually Roland Mayonnaise scored an own goal earlier on, which was the good slice of fortune. There were another stats for you. Stevenage had only scored once in their opening 7 games under Paul Tisdale, though their second goal after the own goal from Mayonnaise came 7 minutes later, when Jake Reeves' cross was met by Chris Lines, who headed the ball from the far post into the back of the net. With 20 minutes to play, Brendan Kiernan cut inside to score for Walsall, though that was merely a consolation. The 3 points were secured eventually by Stevenage, of course, when Jake Taylor scored at the second attempt, ensuring that Stevenage won for the first time since the 20th of November. So Stevenage looked impressive in that game, didn't they, Johnny? How relieved must Paul Tisdale be to finally get that win?
He's a very good manager, isn't he, Paul Tisdale? So I think you've got to give him a bit of time to let it happen. Stevenage have invested well. Jake Taylor was a very good signing, and Chris Lines is a brilliant player. So they've got a good midfield there. So it was only a matter of time before they started putting in some performances. So yeah, I think you look at it as a whole, and they're going to be happy there, and there's going to be more to come from Stevenage.
And David, Walsall have lost 3 successive league games away from home, and have only won once in their last 5, with Manny Monte serving a 7-game ban that has 5 games to go. Should Matt Taylor have a reason to be worried defensively?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think Walsall, one of them sides, have been kind of plodding along in League Two for the last couple of years since they got relegated from League One. I don't say they're a big club for this level, but they're a side that should definitely be doing better than 15th in League Two, I should say. They should be performing a lot better. But yeah, Matty Taylor's still finding his feet in that job a little bit, but the expectation is there at Walsall to be doing a lot better than 15th anyway.
And elsewhere, the final game from the Saturday match day that we'll be talking about. And to be fair, there's not a lot to talk about at all, really. Hartlepool 0, Oldham Athletic 0. Now, I won't go through the game, but first of all, Johnny, Oldham, what has gone wrong for them? Because they have been so poor. Their ownership is poor, of course, and they look to be a club in disarray.
I think you've just hit the nail on the head. Pretty much ownership. I think that's enough to rock any boat. And if one thing can unite a fan base, it's bad owners. We've been through it, so fully appreciate the boat that they're in. And I just worry that the statement from the chairman this week is just to gloss over and try and get people back on his side and get people in the doors to line his pockets. So until that's the club is actually properly for sale and there's some discussions around, I just wouldn't trust him as far as I can throw him. He's meddled too much in everything. He's wanted to pick the team, and it's just Oldham are a team that 30 years ago we're one of the first teams in the Premier League, and now look at them. It'd be a disgrace if they went out of the Football League.
So, David, the big story that is also coming out of Oldham is that the owner is actually willing to sell the club, which is a surprise, really, as Selim Benicol has been very, very quiet in regards to whether he would be willing to let the club go into better hands. But how good a news is that? Because, okay, he said that he's willing to sell. So maybe if you are an Oldham fan, you'd be feeling slightly more positive.
Nah, I've got to agree with John. I got to agree with Johnny on that one. I wouldn't trust Abdallah Lenzargam. I can't get my words out tonight. I wouldn't trust Lenzargam as far as I could throw him. Obviously, he says he's willing to sell the club, but he's not announced like on what terms and things like that. As far as we're concerned, some of them stipulations he could throw in there are ridiculous, and it wouldn't surprise if he has some mad stipulation in there, selling the club, valuing it higher than it's worth. What he's got to bear in mind is that is not an attractive proposition to anybody to buy that club. Currently sitting rock bottom of the Football League and looking like they're very likely to go out of it at the end of the season. They've got a poor squad on paper. Obviously, the fans have been in the media all season for their protests, so whoever comes in has got to get them on side quickly. And still currently without a manager. So, yeah, it's great. It's a great statement to come out with, and I'm sure Oldham fans are rejoicing. But I think a sense of realism does need to be attached to that as well, and the fact that Oldham fans probably shouldn't get too excited until Lenzargam's out the door.
So that game, Hartlepool 0, Oldham Athletic 0, that did happen on January the 1st, although we did need to talk about Oldham due to their current form, so we did briefly touch upon it. If we were to talk about their latest game, they lost in the Football League trophy on the 4th of January to Wigan Athletic. That was a 6-0 thrashing. But their next game is on the 22nd of January. And I just mentioned that gap, Johnny. But how useful is the break for Oldham? Because surely once they do come back from COVID, they will hopefully be a refreshed side.
I think it could do them just as much harm. You only have to look at Carlisle last season. They were flying, and then COVID hit. They missed 4 or 5 games, and they fell off the edge of a cliff. So I'd never say a break's ever good for a football team, because you know what it's like at the start of the season. Some teams come flying out the traps, other teams are just very slow and take 3 or 4 games to get back into it. Then the lucky thing for them is games will be Saturday, Tuesday. So it's not like that they've got to wait a full week to get the next game. But with how it currently is, they could have done with playing these games, especially with some players missing for various different reasons.
Yeah, David, as Johnny just alluded to, could it maybe be a curse that they've had that long a break since their last League Two game?
Yeah, I think some sides, I think, went high up the food chain. If you look at Tottenham a few weeks ago, they had that break, didn't they? They put in like one of their performances of the season against Liverpool. But then obviously some other sides really do struggle after that break, getting the momentum going. I think the key to it really is who is your first opponent. If you've got a side that's struggling for form, had a few games in succession, then yeah, you might be like, yeah, really target that game. But yeah, it's a bit of a difficult one, really. I think it's all down to the attitude of the players and the condition and what they've done in that break. Yeah, so it's a bit of a hard one to answer, really.
And of course, we're now going to briefly touch upon the Tuesday games. We're not going to go through them per se. We're just going to simply look at the results and then maybe ask a few questions. Mansfield Town versus Swindon Town. That finished 3-2 with Mansfield winning. Forest Green Rovers, who are currently top of the table, defeated Colchester United, who are only 3 points above the bottom two. So that game is quite interesting because Colchester United, Johnny, have been so poor this season. Their recruitment hasn't necessarily been that good as well. So are they a team who could potentially go down?
They're owned by someone that's a bit of a lunatic. So some of his comments and stuff that came out last year were bonkers at the end of COVID. So I don't. There's every possibility that they might do. It's a massive window for a lot of clubs, but maybe it's one step too far for a few, and Colchester is definitely one of them.
So, David, Forest Green, they picked up another win. I think that result was more or less inevitable, really, considering the strength of their opponents. But Forest Green Rovers, at the moment, they're absolutely flying in the league. They're 7 points above Tranmere Rovers at the top of the table, which pushes both Northampton and Sutton down a position. Can you see Forest Green maybe seeing this out to the end of the season? Because from what I can see, they're a class above the rest in this league at the moment.
Yeah, they are a cut above. At the moment, they're on course to win League Two by an absolute country mile. They're 12 points clear of fourth spot for the automatic promotion spaces. And yeah, they're a really, really good side. Best attack in the division, second best defence. So they are by far the best side in this league at present. I don't think, obviously, I imagine Johnny might debate this and hope Port Vale can win the league. But yeah, I don't see any team below at this moment in time stopping Forest Green.
And of course, we are going to get on to your questions soon. And I'm going to plug it again, but get your game of the weeks, performances of the week, and villains of the week into us until the end of the show, because we will be getting onto them, of course, and would love to hear your choices. But finally, for the final game of the match day, Salford City 1, Tranmere Rovers 1. Tranmere Rovers have been a very good side to watch, and Salford City have kind of climbed up a little, haven't they? So I'm going to actually start with you, David, on this one, because you attended the game. What was the atmosphere like at Salford? Is there still belief that maybe they can get into the playoffs? And real quickly, sorry for the multiple questions, but what did you make of the game?
Yeah, it's a really good game. The atmosphere was pretty much only generated by the Tranmere fans. One of the rare occurrences in the Football League where an away attendance eclipsed the home attendance. I think Tranmere just slightly edged it. Yeah, they made a lot of noise in that away, and it was a really good atmosphere from their point. A couple of Salford fans that I had the chance to have a quick word with before the game are still fairly optimistic they can get top 7. One that I spoke to did think they could still get top 3, but I think he might have had a few many pints already by the way he was slurring his words. But yeah, it was a really good game overall. I think a draw was a fair result. Tranmere fans might dispute that, given how fortunate Salford were to take the lead. If you haven't seen Salford's goal from the other night, it's one of the best goalkeeping gaffes you'll see all season. So make sure you check that if you've not seen it already. But yeah, it's a really good game. I thought a draw was a fair result. But yeah, it was a really good game on the night.
So, Johnny, Salford, again, we've spoken about them earlier on in the show, but they've improved a little, haven't they? Should they get a few new signings in, do you reckon that they could, and I said this earlier, do you reckon that they could potentially get into the playoffs?
Hopefully not. I couldn't think of anything worse than them succeeding. Like I just can't stand. I can't stand the arrogance around them. I think from the latest class of '92, you see them turn up at Vale in Scholes' first game in charge, and he turns up and is like, "Oh, we should smash these," and it's just like they've just got that arrogance about them. And I get that you need that bit of an arrogance and swagger to succeed, but there's a way to go about it, and they found it a lot more difficult than I think they ever thought it would be. And it's not helped by the fact that they've got Ibu Traore out on international duty at the minute, and he's one of their better players. And I think you said earlier, Ashhunt has been injured as well, hasn't he? So it's hopefully not, but they're going to spend some money at some point in this window.
And finally, we are
just
going
to add to that before we go.
Yep, no worries.
Sorry, Ben. Just to add to that, like, just a point to make about Salford, and John's kind of alludes to that, the arrogance of the owners. Like when you do watch that Class of '92 documentary, the target being the Championship within the next couple of years. And no disrespect to Salford, but they are a small club that have come from like 3-4 leagues below the Football League when they took the club over. The crowds have never really got any better. Like a Tuesday night game against one of their rivals in a League Two like promotion race, and they had 1,100 fans at home. To get into the Championship, they need the people of Salford to probably turn out, and I do think that the Class of '92 lot do need to readjust their expectations, because League Two is not an easy league to get out of, and when they get into League One, they're going to be in for a huge wake-up call, because they will struggle in that league if they continue with that attitude. So yeah, I think the fan base needs to grow, but I imagine a lot of the Plastic United fans who might get disillusioned over the next couple of years might fall by the wayside and end up at Salford. But yeah, I don't see Salford getting to the Championship, which is where they're wanting to end up being.
So, David, I mean, I reckon I already know what your answer's going to be, but do Salford have any reason to be cocky, if you will? Because, you know, like, they're a club, you have a huge backing. They've been promoted back to back. Well, that was a couple of years ago, but they did have back to back promotions. So do you reckon, as I just said, they have a reason to be arrogant?
Not really, no, because that squad they've got should be much higher than it is in the table. I think they've massively underperformed so far this season for the team they've got. I know they've been played by injuries a little bit as of late, but they've got the biggest budget in this division. I think some people might argue that isn't the case, but they've got wealthy owners. Obviously, they've got the Class of '92. Is it Peter Lim? Yeah. I might have got the name wrong there. I know he's like involved with Valencia as well, so he's not short of a few quid either. So I know I've just been bashing on Salford a little bit, but they have got a good setup. If you are a neutral or Salford fan, it's not the worst football experience. It's not. They've got decent facilities, but they have pumped a lot of money into it. But yeah, in terms of bragging, when they're sitting where they are in the table with the resource they've got, there's not much to really brag about.
And of course, we are now going to head over to the questions. You can, of course, ask away your questions over on Twitter at @OverTheBarFB. And you can also join the conversation over on YouTube. Unfortunately, the chat function isn't working over on Twitter. So if you did want to get involved, as I just said, you'd have to go over to YouTube. So now on to the Twitter questions. Again, you can find us at @OverTheBarFB, or if you wanted to ask both of us the questions, you can find David on Twitter at @DP_overthebar, or me at Benjamin Eyriey. But to start off with, we have a question over on Twitter by Frank Pargeter. He asks us to discuss the Oldham situation. I think we've already gone through that. Here's a question. I'll come to both of you for this one, and I'll start off with you, Johnny, for this. Which new arrival in League Two do you reckon will have the most impact?
Oh, Kane Hemmings probably. He's a goal scorer. I think goal scorers have impacts, and Tranmere are all set up to get promotion this season. So I think adding somebody like him, I think it's a massive signing.
How about you, David?
I was going to agree with Johnny, but just to be a little bit different, I think Ryan Loft will have a big impact at Bristol Rovers in the second half of the season. Looked decent in a really poor Scunthorpe side, so I'm quite looking forward to see how he does in a better team. Bristol Rovers still aren't the best side in this league by a long shot, but I think he'll do a lot better, and I think he'll get quite a few goals from between now and the end of the season.
And one final question from Frank. And don't forget, he does do some fantastic content on Bradford, so go and check that out if you have time. But Frank has asked, in terms of a transfer window, which club do you believe has had the best season in the transfer window so far? So I believe what he's asking is, who has had the best transfer window so far? So Johnny, I'll start with you. Which team do you reckon has had the best transfer window?
I've got to be biased and say us. I think you look at the business we've done at the minute. What we've released Danny Whitehead, which was always going to happen. He'd been out on loan non-league. Leggy's gone to Harrogate, and we've replaced a 35-year-old with a 28-year-old. So that's brilliant business. And we've signed 2 strikers and the best left wing back in the league for last season. So at the moment, I think we've done the best business. But we're 13 days in, and there's still a lot to come, I think.
He's also asked who the worst team in the window is. So, David, which team has had the worst transfer window?
I'm gonna have to go with Rochdale. Sold 2 key players in Aaron Morley and Jake Beasley. Hopefully, we use the money to reinvest. But again, I'm not holding my breath given how I don't say Rochdale are penny pinchers, but we don't tend to splash the cash, to be put it politely. But yeah, we've signed Paul Downing on loan today from Portsmouth, very experienced centre back. But we need to. I think we can get away without replacing Morley. But if we don't replace Jake Beasley, I'm not looking forward to the rest of the season anyway.
And now we are going to go on to the questions over on YouTube. Don't forget, you still have time to ask your questions by sending them in over on YouTube or alternatively on Twitter at OverTheBarFB. But to start off with, F28GP, JP says, some decent business at Vale at the moment, a lot of outs recently too. So yeah, real quickly, because we did briefly talk about this earlier, what have you made of your transfer window, Johnny?
I've loved it so far. I think we've done the right thing. We've brought in the right players. There's still 2 or 3 players that Clark said that we're looking at, and I think if you make the right signings in January, it could be massive. Remember the last time we got out of this league, we brought in Darren Pearson, Lee Hughes, and that was enough to drag us over the line because at times during that second half of the season, people had found us out almost. I think the more you play, obviously, the more people watch games and find out your formation, your key players, your threats, and figure out ways to stifle that. So by having the ability to change it up, it's looking good.
So, David, the next question comes in from Gary Jones over on YouTube. How does Dave feel about Beasley and Morley being sold? And does he think Rochdale will reinvest, where you already said this earlier, will reinvest the money from the transfer fees, which is probably a no? And if they are to reinvest, which players would he like to see arrive? So, I already have a hunch on what your first answer is going to be, but who do you reckon? Well, actually, I'm going to restyle that question. Who would you like to see come to the club if your owners were unrealistically to invest into your squad?
I can't think of any names to throw out there. There's definitely certain positions. Actually, I will throw one name out there. We need to sign Corey O'Keefe on a permanent transfer from Mansfield. That's one bit of business that Rochdale fans are dying to see happen. I know Bradford are well within the mix as well to try and get him, but hopefully he's enjoyed his time with us so far, and that helps us get that over the line. We definitely need a defensive midfielder, like experience as well. Like the issue I've got with our squad, it's too young and inexperienced. And I just feel like at times we're battered about in games just by more experienced players, and I'd love to see like a veteran style, like centre defensive midfielder to come in there to be a bit of a twat in the middle of midfield, to put it politely, and just boss games a little bit. And then finally, just a striker to replace Beasley. I know I've been linked with somebody called Luke Charman from Darlington. I don't know much about him. It was a name I've seen knocked about on Twitter. I don't know much about him. And then I'm sure there's a player that we've been linked with from Aberdeen, a central midfielder. Like the name escapes me a little bit. I'm sure Port Vale have been linked with him as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Dean Campbell.
Yeah. So we've been linked with him as well. But as long as we improve the spine of the team, get the defensive midfielder in, a striker in, Corey O'Keefe on a permanent transfer, I'd be more than happy with that.
And elsewhere in regards to the questions, John Fleming enjoying the show as always. We've had some great news this week with Lemzargen saying he'll sell. I feel like Van Power has won. Yeah, I thoroughly agree in that. And again, there are so many clubs in League Two at the moment, even League One, who've had problems with their owners. And we've also seen clubs push out their owners. Look at Ipswich, for example, with Marcus Evans. So yeah, fantastic news, and hopefully you do sell up soon. John Fleming, Mansfield 5 wins in a row and 8 games in the last 9, giving them 24 points from a possible 27. Only conceded 8 goals in that time frame. Only Man City are on a better run in European football right now. You should maybe do my job because you're better at looking at stats than I am. Thank you for the information. Yeah, Mansfield, fantastic team at the moment, aren't they, David?
Yeah, and it's to be expected. They got a cracking manager in Nigel Clough, so I was shocked to see him doing as poorly as they were at the start of the season, but massively improved, and they put themselves in a decent shout of getting into the top 7 going into the second half of the season. I still think second and third are all to play for. I think the only team that can feel a bit comfortable of where they are at the minute is Forest Green, but anything from second downwards, I think you can even include like teams like Carlisle are in like 18th, 19th place, would still fancy the chance of getting in the playoffs. The league is that tight. And once all these games in hand are caught up, teams like Mansfield could well be in the shout of being in the top 3.
So, Johnny, we've probably listed up around 8 teams we reckon could potentially be in the playoffs at the end of the season. But Nigel Clough, he's found his feet at Mansfield. Do you reckon that they could potentially disrupt the 4 teams in the playoffs at the moment?
I think there's a potential there. He's a manager who's got a, shall we say, a style of management. I don't particularly think that he's that good of a manager. I think you look at the success he's had, and it's been on the back of other people. And now at Mansfield, he's got a blank checkbook, and they're willing to throw money at the problems. So they're a signing away from capitulation, and it seems like that always happens at Mansfield. So we'll see what happens. They've been a mid-table club for a very, very many years, whilst throwing 5-6k a week at people like Nicky Maynard. So who knows?
So Dan Green, Forest Green Rovers on 51 points from 23 games. That's more than any other eventual League Two champion teams in the last 8 seasons. So do we assume they will set a new points haul record? And how many points do you predict? So, okay, to start off with you, Johnny, how many points this season for Forest Green Rovers? Maybe 100, 200, 500?
I think if anyone thinks they'll end on 100 points, I think you've got to take a long hard look at yourself, because the first half of the season has been very good, but can that carry on? I think you very rarely see a team replicate the first half and the second half. They're going to win the league. They're by far the best team in the league, but I think they'll end up on around 80-ish points, I think.
So, David, how about you? Because Forest Green still have to play the likes of Northampton, Mansfield. Do you reckon they could potentially finish, as Johnny said, on 80 points? Or do you reckon that they'll unrealistically finish on 100 or maybe even higher, like what I just said?
Yeah, they won't crack the 100-point mark. I don't think they'll... To become the record points haul scorers, they will need to break 100 points. I've just had a quick look to see who holds that record. The 2 teams who come the closest are MK Dons back in 2007-8. They finished on 97 points. That was the year. It was a ridiculously strong league that year, if I remember, because Milton Keynes Dons won the league. Peterborough second, when they had like Aaron McLean, George Boyd, and Hereford came third. Stockport beat Rochdale in the playoff final, which still keeps me up at night. So, like 13 years later, and then Northampton finished on 99 points back in 2016. I had no idea that Northampton finished on 99 points in the league. So it's a big ask, but yeah, personally, I don't think they'll do it myself anyway.
So, Mark Baker, this is more of a question for you, David. Will he be doing a show on the Championship to cover the full EFL? Well, I don't know if we already have people doing that. Do we, David?
We don't, and if we were to do it, it wouldn't be me doing it. Say doing the League One and League Two stuff. I was sure you could testify to, Ben. It is quite time consuming. And to be honest, I don't pay any attention to the Championship at all personally. I love watching the Premier League, League One, League Two, but yeah, I don't say I have no time for the Championship. I just can't find the time to watch anything Championship related. So if there is going to be any Championship shows, it won't be myself that's involved anyway.
Yeah, and I'll repeat more or less the same. I don't really follow the Championship as Ipswich haven't been in there for a while, but there are some fantastic articles over on overthebar.com. So if you want to read some Championship content, then head over to there for some fantastic content. I highly recommend, and I haven't been paid by Over the Bar to say that. So Mark Baker asks, well, he doesn't ask, he says, I would love to go to the new lawn to see what veganism is all about, or Valley Parade as their stand looks massive. So I've already asked you, David, in the past about the stadiums that you would like to visit, and I think I've been asked that as well. But Johnny, which stadiums in League Two would you like to visit?
Harrogate and Barrow currently, because they're the only two that I've not been to.
I can advise you, you're probably best off avoiding Harrogate, if I'm being honest. John, I went on the opening day of the season. It's one of the worst away days I've ever been on, sadly. The town itself's beautiful, but the stadium leaves a lot to be desired, to put it politely anyway.
Yeah, they're the only two I've not been to, so it's just a ticking off exercise. And supposed to have gone Harrogate New Year's Day, but COVID put pay to that, so it's Tuesday night now. So I can imagine it's going to be even worse than the first game of the season.
So again, many apologies to any Harrogate fans in the chat at the moment. Please don't block us or unsubscribe to us. But what is so bad about Harrogate Stadium, David?
We weren't made to feel all. Obviously, I don't know if you saw Johnny in the build to start the season, but we didn't know we could actually go to the game until like 2-3 days before the actual game, because they failed like safety certificates like in the week leading up to the game, so we couldn't even buy a ticket until the Wednesday, I think. On the day, we couldn't buy a program. On the day, you had to order in advance, but the cut-off date was before the tickets went on sale. On the day itself, they didn't tell us in advance that it was a cashless stadium, so a lot of Dale fans turned up, weren't allowed to pay cash for any food or drinks. We lost, so that doesn't help matters either. But it was just a bit of it weren't very a fan-friendly experience, is probably the best way of putting it.
And we have so many questions in the chat tonight. Thank you so much. So Josh Lane, do you think Salford will get promoted? So Johnny, do you reckon Salford will get promoted? I think we've already discussed this earlier on in the show, but yeah, do you reckon that they could potentially get promoted?
Hopefully not, but there's the potential there. They've got a decent side, and they're close enough. But hopefully there's 7 better teams in the league than them.
And Gary Jones he's talking about the heroes of the week, performances of the week, and villains of the week. So get yours through, and we'll whiz through them at the end of the show because we are running long. Gary Jones, for his performance of the week, has to be Tranmere for their 4-0 demolition. And Chris Saunders, the 4-0 win against Scunny, and then the 1-1 draw versus Salford 3 days later. I agree, Gary. Tranmere all the way. So, David, Tranmere Rovers, again, we spoke about that performance at length earlier on, but it was a great performance, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a good performance. I think you can kind of take the gloss of it by saying it was against a poor Scunthorpe side, and for argument's sake, they're not my performance of the week anyway. I think there was one better performance for me, but we'll come back to that later when we're doing performance of the week anyway.
And Ben Wilson, excuse me, my voice just broke then. Ben Wilson up the Crawley town. big club. Chris Saunders, is it just me, or were Swindon actually pretty good against City in the Cup? Despite the scoreline, I thought they would drop out of the EFL. They were so bad last year, but they seem all right this season. So we've spoken about Tyrese Simpson. He's a fantastic player. But Johnny, Swindon Town, do you reckon they made a good account for themselves in the Cup?
Yeah, they look decent. They play some good football, don't they? Eyriey McCurdy's come into his own this season. We had him last year and he couldn't make the squad. His attitude, for all intents and purposes, stinks. Carlisle fans, after he scored 10 and assisted, I think, another 10 for him, were happy to see him go. And no club at League Two is going to throw away 20 goals like that and be proud of it, but they were happy. So I think that says it all. If he's got his head down and he's got it screwed on, then Swindon have got a great player on their hands. He's doing well, but it only takes one moment for Eyriey McCurdy to switch, and then he becomes who he is again. They've just lost 2 players today. They've been recalled from loan. So who knows how big of an effect that's going to have. And I'm hoping Ipswich decide that Tyrese Simpson's good enough for League One and get rid of him before Saturday. So if you can ask that question, that'd be grand.
So, David, what were your thoughts on the game? Because, again, Tyrese Simpson, as you just said, Johnny, fantastic player. But do you reckon Swindon made a good account for themselves?
Yeah, to a degree. I think, obviously, when you're coming up against a team like Man City, it's always going to be a difficult task. But at the end of the day, they lost 4-1. So it's just one of them things, unfortunately. The effort was there, but yeah, I struggle to take the whole you lost 4-1 and be happy about it. I know personally I wouldn't be. I know when we got battered off Newcastle in an FA Cup replay a couple of years ago after a really good home performance, I walked away from that game being really angry because we didn't turn up on the night. And just my opinion really on getting battered by a bigger team.
And Ben Morris, are Rochdale still at risk of a hostile takeover, or has that gone away now?
The honest answer, I have no idea. The amount of stuff that keeps cropping up in the news about it, it's hard to keep up with what's going on. I know Morton House, who were trying to do the hostile takeover, submitted court papers to try and take the board of directors to court. I don't know how that's going to end up. I can never remember the guy's name. Who was this? The name's gone, but one of the people involved in that has been banned from by the FA for football and activity. I think for 6 months, if I'm not mistaken, for comments he made in a meeting regarding that takeover. I can't remember if they were sexist, homophobic, racist. There were very negative comments, to put it politely. I know there was like another consortium with somebody who was involved with Charlton. Again, I can never remember the names of these rogue people that try and get involved with football, but we've done the whole like fan shares where we tried to sell shares to the right people to try and dilute these people's shareholdings, but until we see anything positive in the news, it's always going to be a lingering threat, really.
And finally, Mattia Castillo. Hello, David. Well, okay, a little thing about this comment right here. I somehow managed to translate it from Spanish into English. So it's actually come up in really bad broken English. So I'm so sorry, Matthew, for translating it. He actually did ask us in Spanish, and what he was meant to say was, do you speak any Spanish, David?
No, I think he's put that to another, somebody a bit further up called David Navas. So I think he's aiming his comment at him, Ben.
No worries. But yeah, that isn't how the question came up. It was just poorly translated by StreamYard. And for some daft reason, I decided to enable it. But I think that is all the questions for tonight. Just real quickly, we're going to go for your heroes of the week, villains of the week, and performances of the week. We've already read those out from the live chat. So I'm going to come on to you, Johnny, and I'm so sorry for throwing this on to you, as I should have asked you over on Twitter before you came live. But do you have any picks for games of the week, performances of the week, or villains of the week?
I think game of the week's got to be the Mansfield Swindon game. I think when you look at the fact that Swindon were 2-1 up, Swindon equalised in the Mansfield were 2-1 up, and then Swindon then scored, and then Bowery scored and made it 3-1. And I think it was a very, very good game when you look at it. But Cloughie's side did very well in that game. So that'd be my game of the week.
How about your villain of the week? Who would your villain of the week be?
Villain of the week. I think it's got to be the Oldham chairman with that statement. I think that it still doesn't sit well with me. I just think I just hate the fact that he's come out and said he'll sell the club, because I don't believe a word that's coming out of his mouth. But yeah, people will, and I'd say it'll appease some people. So he's my villain of the week, and I think it will be until he's out of the football pyramid altogether.
And finally, David, and many apologies because I did forget to send you over the questions over on Twitter. So sorry for kind of throwing you into the deep end there. But David, finally, what is your game of the week? Then we'll go on to the performances of the week and then villains of the week.
Yeah, game of the week, I agree with Johnny. The Mansfield Swindon game, a lot of goals and a really end-to-end spectacle. So yeah, that gets my nod this week.
Performance of the week.
I've gone with Stevenage beating Walsall. I think it was a long overdue win from Stevenage. It wasn't one I don't think many people saw coming. It was a really good 3-1 win as well. So Stevenage get it for me this week. I know the comments seem to want us to give it to Tranmere, but yeah, I'm going to go with Stevenage this week.
And finally, villain of the week.
Yeah, obviously, I think I've said Lumzagan quite a lot during the season, but I've tried to keep it on the pitch matters this week, and I've gone with Thin Azaz at Newport. I think when I was looking at some of the match reports for the Newport-Salford game at the weekend, Newport were well in that game, well on top, and then that own goal just before half-time kind of turned the game in Salford's favour. Ultimately led to Salford getting the win, so I think that own goal from Azaz was crucial in that at the weekend.
And of course, thank you very much to Johnny for joining us on tonight's show. Real quickly, where can they find you on Twitter? Where can they find the show? And yeah, if there's a place where they can support you, where can they support both you and the show?
Yeah, so we're on Twitter at Eyriey Vale Pod. We're on Spotify under Eyriey Vale Podcast and Apple Music, and yeah, there's best two places really.
And real quickly, David, to help me wrap up the show, where can people find Over the Bar on Twitter? Where can they find us on iTunes and Spotify? And what else do they need to know to be up to date with Over the Bar?
Yeah, just for against that, cheers again, Johnny, for coming on. You've been a great guest, and all the best to Port Vale for the rest of the season. Hopefully you finish below Rochdale, but I'm not going to put any money on it, to be fair. But yeah, just the usual wrap up at the end of the show, really. If you do want to find us in the meantime, you can do at otbfootball.net. It's where we get all the written content shared for anything football related. If you have an interest in a certain league or part of the game, we've got you covered. Also, make sure you check us out on Twitter at OverTheBarFB. Also, if you are watching us live on Twitter or you're listening to us on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, make sure you head over to our YouTube channel. You can either search for Over the Bar FB, or also you can go to youtube.com/Over the Bar FB. But that is everything for another week. We'll be back next week, and the way things are looking, we're going to have a lot more games to cover this weekend, with the FA Cup being out of the way for another few weeks, and also with COVID seeming like it's going to settle down a little bit. So hopefully we're going to have quite a few more games to talk about with you next week. But yeah, thank you, Ben, and thank you, Johnny, again. Thank you, everyone in the comments, for getting involved, and we'll see you all again next week.